Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So in this video we're going to review a recent interview that has been quite hyped up on YouTube, and in certain aspects it's not as good as you think. So the part that has been hyped up is not good, and there's some very good tidbits in this interview which were not hyped up, which are actually fantastic. So we're gonna look at this video together and let's see what we can take away. And as always, if you like this content, please make sure you're subscribed, and if you want to go and help out the channel even more, check out the first link, which is a link to our Patreon, where you can support the channel from $5 a month. So let's check this video.
Squawk on the street. Over the weekend, I attended the annual Reagan National Defense Forum out in Simi Valley, California. In the first of a series of interviews that we will be bringing you this week, I caught up with Palantir CEO and co-founder Alex Karp to discuss the data analytics company's role in the war in Ukraine, demand from government as well as commercial customers and businesses, even his reaction to Wall Street's reaction to the stock. Take a listen.
We spent well over a decade, and certainly if you look from inception, building products for peace. So so you could distribute vaccines and organize many of the most important institutions in the world. But of course,
is it just me, or is Alex Karp very fidgety? I noticed it on Foundry Con that he couldn't sit on the chair and he was always moving, and even now he's very fidgety. This has nothing to do with the stock price, but maybe there will be some YouTubers who, just like the ones who are pointing out he's been banging on the table on conference calls, so that's why Palantir must be a bad company. So now we have another one for their list. The CEO is very fidgety, so this must be a bad company.
Products of war, we believed and believe, if unlike most of our colleagues in Silicon Valley, if you are strong, you prevent the adversary from acting up, and that's why we thought this war might happen. We build products that allow you to do very high-end AI-enabled targeting. Most of the details we can't discuss, but our adversaries are very, very well aware now of their impact. These products have changed the course of history. They changed the power structure of America. And perhaps most importantly, as a former academic, our adversaries used to run around the world. We have a very significant business outside of America saying, well, America has liberty and entertainment and freedom, but we're better at fighting wars. We're better at building products of war. We're better at internal surveillance. And now, lo and behold, it turns out those of us who are purveyors not just of war products, but of liberty, most importantly, the United States of America, are not only better at entertainment and having fun, we're also better at building products of war. And that narrative, I think, is going to change the world, is already changing the world, because of the many things we're not allowed to say that have happened in the Ukraine, our adversaries know every single one of them. And so we are no longer viewed, America, as just a place that produces the most important articles of liberty, but as a culture that builds the best software.
There's a lot I want to pick up on there. I guess the first thing, though, is I see these conversations happening in places like this forum, this idea that we have to move more quickly where things like software and new technologies are concerned. DOD and other entities are not doing enough, are not deploying enough. But then I hear you talk, and it sounds like maybe that's not necessarily the case, at least where Palantir is concerned.
A lot of tech companies are, now they're, not all, but, you just have to, when we had our conversation last year, we were still in a phase where, most software companies, and certainly most companies in Silicon Valley, their basic view is how can we help the adversary while pretending to help America. So first and foremost, what we need to do in America is make sure that everyone, especially in Silicon Valley, is aligned with we are going to give our best products and our best technology to the U.S. government first, not second, fourth, and fifth, while pretending we care because we've got some crazy idea that no one cares about that makes us feel superior to everyone else. That's the most important thing. The U.S. economy, we're seeing this in our software sales in the U.S., and especially the U.S. government. Sure, there's a lot you can complain about, but it is the best at adaptation. We had to fight our way into DOD. People, because of the size and footprint of our work, they think we're insiders. We see the U.S. government not once, but twice, not to buy Palantir, but to buy the best software, and we won twice. And so the U.S. government has been iterating and adopting and adopting and adopting. Quite frankly, the larger problem is many of our allies are living in the 70s where hardware alone could work and spending all their money on local industry that isn't really that good at software. So I think the onus of us in technology is to really invest. Of course, most companies can't be focused on the U.S. military the way we are because it's core to our mission, but they can't be focused last on the U.S. military and then complain that it's too hard.
Is it changing now because of Ukraine?
Well, there's a lot that's changing. Look, so an already fairly good situation is getting better for technology companies because the U.S. economy and U.S. institutions in general are very pragmatic. They're much less ideological than in other countries. They're like, well, what worked? How did it work? How much did we spend on it, and what were the results? Is a very American way of looking at something. And it is exactly the way you look at tech implementation, whether it's a company or a government. And there's the outside version of what you're allowed to say, but the inside version, with all the data, a lot of which is classified, you see that it is not just a banality that we are in a software world. We are in a software world. And what's also interesting is what is America indisputably the best in the world at doing? Building software. And no one doubts it's interesting. If you ask most Americans, they'll be like, well, we're good at football. We're good at films that I never watch. We have a great finance industry. We're good at, having politicians that none of us really understand. We have a lot of aptitudes, but actually what we're the best at is building software. And it turns out for transforming your industry in hard times and winning against adversaries, it is the single most important thing.
It sort of speaks to what you talked about in your recent letter, which was you've shifted from insurgent outsider to incumbent. This idea of software as a prime, how big is that opportunity for Palantir?
Well, America spends about $800 billion on software. By the way, we're also very big in Britain and a number of other countries. So, to use a term I hate that financial people love, total addressable market, is probably, north of $900 billion. And, we believe we have the single most important components for adaptive warfare against a large adversary that's willing to allow their troops to die. So exactly what you saw in the Ukraine. And that the percentage of the 900 billion that we would be able to capture is obviously very large because pragmatic people are like, well, I could spend 100 billion on something that maybe has marginal impact that our adversaries, by the way, when you're looking at value, you always...
Okay, so this was the part that was super hyped up. And I hate when, companies talk about total addressable market because it's nothing that you can spend. It's not a tangible number. It doesn't mean anything. At best, it can give you like a feeling of, okay, how good this company can become. But one point that is very, very important, if we agree that there is a total addressable market, and we can argue if it's 900 billion, 500 billion, a trillion, or 100 billion, Palantir is at $2 billion yearly run rate currently, and they are getting by far the biggest contracts in this field. So it's very logical, whereas, because, as stock investors, we tend to be focused on, oh, Snowflake is growing a lot of customers. They have 6,000 customers. Yeah, but their average customer is spending, I don't know, 20, 30. I actually don't know the number, but they have a small amount of customers that spend over $1 million with them per year. And if you look at a recent survey that was done of which company sells the most in artificial intelligence, Palantir came out as number one, ahead of Google, ahead of Microsoft. So this is a very interesting point that if we suppose that there is a TAM, which, we don't necessarily have to agree to that it's 900 billion, but Palantir is going to have a very, very sizable part in that. So that's really, really good.
To ask, what is it that I can build the adversary can't build? And there's a lot of things that are going to shift simply because we're building things adversaries can also build. But software, they will not be able to keep up with us. And so more and more of that market is going to come to, not just in Palantir's direction, but in the direction of people that can build software that is useful or critical for warfare.
By the way, I think many of these interviews are not for the average public, but is more a sales pitch for the government employees that are working. And it's so true. Anybody can build rockets, anybody can build tanks. And, the past warfare was who can chunk out the most tanks from their factories. But the modern warfare is, fought a lot with software. And because the US has so much of the world's software capabilities, it's not something that the adversaries can easily replicate. And after Ukraine, they understand that this cannot be. So if you're a government official, then you know, what you take away from this is Palantir is a good thing, and we should invest more into that because it gives us an edge as opposed to investing more into planes and tanks. And it's a very, very clever sales pitch.
We hear so much about China's investment in technologies. You mentioned surveillance states earlier in this conversation. I mean, it's the sort of king surveillance state, case in point, what we've seen play out in terms of protests and at least initial response to those protests in the last couple of days. Can we really counter China when technology and software are concerned? Are we really that much more dominant when they have a different business model and they've been much more aggressive on the government side?
They have a business model to control their citizens, and we will not surpass them at that, and thank God. We have a business model in America to increase liberty at home and to make sure adversaries that attack us or our allies pay a very, very heavy price. We need to stay focused on our business model. If it's about central control, either of economy or of your citizens, they win. If it's about distributed systems where you share information that's crucial for weapons of war with your adversaries, we have a huge advantage. We actually have allies and friends.
Let's talk a little bit about the commercial side of the business, especially when you're talking about technologies that have been applied to, for example, evacuations in Afghanistan being the same type of technologies that are now being purchased by commercial entities.
Again, she's asking about the commercial, and yeah, we all want to hear about it, but there was a very interesting thing he said about government, that yeah, if the game is who can control the citizens more, China is always going to win. But if the game is like who has a more distributed, shared war system, then the US and its allies are more ahead and have the chance to go ahead. And again, this is a very, very clever sales pitch to government employees. And Elon Musk says, I think it was Elon Musk or one of the how to sell books that I have read, that the best sales is when you don't know that you're being sold. And Alex Karp comes to these interviews and says, we are very bad salespeople. And then everybody lets the guards down. And then he starts selling. It's just, we don't know who he's selling. So in this interview, he was very heavily selling the government and, U.S. allied governments to use Palantir.
Well, what we see is that the most important market in the world, the U.S. of A., is also the most adaptive market in the world. Our commercial offering is flying off the shelf. We grew in the last 12 months 102% in the U.S. America adapts, and will, in the end, buy the single best products on the market. That's why we're succeeding, despite the fact that we're new to this game and by building out a commercial sales force and doing all sorts of things normal companies are doing. Communicating with normal, otherwise adult people is not something we're particularly adept at. But we are very good at building software. The same software use cases that you have in government can be applied to American.
Do you think Wall Street truly understands what Palantir is doing, particularly on the commercial side, particularly given the fact that stock's down something like 60% this year?
Well, I think Wall Street largely understands we're a tech company and punishes all tech companies right now. The interesting thing about Palantir is all of our products historically, whether it's our Intel product or it's the mapping toggles, it's the AI product that's now changed the world, the product that we built to distribute the vaccine have been 5 years ahead of the market. Our commercial offering is 5 years ahead, 3-4 years ahead of what Wall Street probably understands. Wall Street will very well understand the value of Palantir as they begin to take account of the fact that we're just outstripping everyone with our Foundry product. It will take a while, just like, honestly, when we were talking last year and I was saying, hey, we're going to do A, B, C, D. Well, that looks bad crazy. It's not bad crazy when Russia goes into a country in the software. And this is the exact same thing when it comes to Palantir's full value. And by the way, I would also say Palantir has always been over and undervalued. And clearly we're undervalued, but at some point we'll be overvalued again.
So there you go. We are clearly undervalued and Wall Street doesn't see. And by the way, I just did an interview with Arni Trezzi from Italy. Very interesting Palantir interview. I really recommend you to watch it, where we talk exactly about this, that how analysts analyze a stock. And because Palantir is in the beginning of its story, they completely miss what Palantir can become. And this is exactly what Karp is also talking about, that they're either overvalued. Obviously, when they were $44, they were overvalued. But when or they're undervalued, and now they're very, very undervalued. And I mean, what else is a CEO going to say? But I was very happy to hear that he's very confident about the commercial and the U.S. commercial sector. So that's something very bullish on the short term. And this was a very good sales pitch to the government. So let me know, guys, what you think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.